Greetings, Darklings, from across the interweb. It is once again I, the Duchess Precious Ken, here for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. I'm really excited. We got a great guest for today, somebody that I've known for a long time now in the group, and is a pretty active user there with some great, interesting stories. First, I want to give a couple shout outs. One to my boy Benny Sweat of the Sweat Boys. So I don't know, I just was thinking the other day, it came up in memories, and I will tell you what, Nervous Prayers, if you haven't heard that album, I think it's one of the best synthwave projects of the modern era. So go check out the Sweat Boys, Send More Dudes. And the other one, I saw a picture the other day, and I always love to see this. Allie Frost was out there with Daniel of Glass Apple Bonsai at the Terminus Festival in Seattle, which great lineup, looks like an absolute blast, having so much fun. But was rocking a Sounds and Shadows shirt, which always fills my heart with joy that she was out there and kind of showing support. And if you take a picture of your Sounds and Shadows shirt at like an event or anything like that, or you're playing one, let me know, because I will make sure to shout you out too. So without further ado, I have my guest with me today, Colin of the band Slider, which is this amazing electronica project that I always say is one of the best for telling a story with sonic elements. It really, this is somebody who is a sonic painter, that every time I listen to it, I can close my eyes and go somewhere, and not even like, I don't know, go to the beaches of Greece or something. Go on a space voyage, go to an alien planet, go to a dystopian world. It really, he has an amazing ability for capturing a fantasy concept in sonic form. So I've always been really impressed with that, and I'm excited to talk about it. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken, for having me and saying such nice things.
I'm a good complimenter.
I just want to go back for a minute. The name of that Sweat Boys EP is Send More Dudes.
No, that's something that is kind of like a motto or something.
Oh, is it?
Benny always says.
It's brilliant.
It's Nervous Prayers, but yeah, like on t-shirts and stuff. And if you've never seen it live on stage, it's him doing the whole performance, but he usually just has like 5 shirtless guys as backup dancers in like various leather gear or something. So
I love it. That's awesome.
So, Colin, I want to get rolling in. And one of the things I always like to ask to maybe some of our listeners that don't know you as well, there was a moment, a thing that happened in your history, whether it was you saw a show, you heard an album, you, I don't know, saw a Rocky Horror Picture for the first time. I don't know what it was, but something happened and a light switch went off and you went, this is me. This is for me. This is my scene and my people. And tell me a little bit about what that was that drew you in, and then what was some of the musical history you had leading up to Slider.
Well, firstly, like, it's cheesy, but as a kid, I always loved music, exposed to it a lot growing up. But I don't think it was until I saw Hackers that I really understood like what electronic music could be, other than like Miami Sound Machine or Gloria Estefan or something like that, where it's like dance music and it's on the cheesier end
I love some Gloria Estefan, Miami Sound Machine, so I love that reference and that call out.
But at 15, to me, that was kind of like, oh, that was the mainstream, and then here comes Underworld and Left Field and The Prodigy. So that was like the huge eye-opening thing to me, is like, oh, like electronic music can be something other than what I'm used to. Yeah. And that really just was like the rabbit hole that I just fell down, that because there was just so much that just really got me at that point in my life as a kid with an empty head that could be filled with ideas, and that was really filled with a lot of electronic stuff. And that kind of brought me over to the Wax Trax label, because they were the only people in America that were importing Underworld. So when I got an Underworld record, it said Wax Trax on it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, what's this label? And that, takes you down to my life. The Thrill Kill Cult, KMFDM, ChemLab, all that good
Those early
stuff.
wax track samplers, like people forget, and we
Yeah.
talked about this on the show before with like Clio samplers and things like that. When we didn't have the internet to just Google search or have Spotify to tell us 10,000 bands for any one we played, you had to get those samplers for the
Yeah.
one band on it you liked, and then you would find 30 other bands.
Right. It was that, or for me, I would go to record stores and just look at album covers. Like if I
Yes.
recognize the label and then look at the cover and be like, 'cause that's how, I got to KMFDM Symbols. I was like, oh, that's a real striking cover. And you flip it over. Oh, it's Wax Tracks. All right, cool. I'll probably get into that. And that's the nice thing about being that age at like 15 and 16 is that you're just so mentally, able to take it in. You've got a very elastic brain for that kind of stuff. So you don't have that like, oh, I don't have this taste yet. So it's like, no, it's easy to absorb and get in on things that maybe later on would have been harder to get into if you had established that sort of lane that you sit in. So for me
That's
being,
really interesting. You said that. I've never thought of it that way before, but in the same way that you hear Pretty Hate Machine when you're 17 years old and some girl just done you wrong and the world is over. Like it's never, you're never coming back from this. You're just smoking a clove cigarette behind your shed crying and like it's all done because you're 17. And to the point of what you just said, I never thought of it that way, but nostalgia, maybe that's one of the reasons why nostalgia hits so hard on it is because of that elastic brain and your ability to just fall so deep into something. It was just as true for music as it was for love.
yeah, I mean, that's totally how your brain works. You have neural pathways that you rely on. So you hear people say, and I think I've talked about this a few times in the group, is that you have a song you hear and you go, oh, I'm not really into that. But like the third or fourth listen, you're like, oh, okay, wait, I'm
Yeah.
starting to get into this. No, I like this now. And the reason really is that your brain at the first listen to it didn't have a neural pathway, didn't have the nostalgia to align that with something else. So it goes, no, 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 no. But then you hear it again and again, and your brain's like, oh, wait, no, I remember this now. And it's giving you that little bit of neural pathway. So I always tell people, listen to stuff that you might not enjoy at first and give it a try. Like keep going, especially if it's my stuff. Please listen more to it.
Love it, love it. Well, and so now take us a little further. You heard that, you were kind of sparked by it, and you decided to yourself try and expand those boundaries of electronic music and what could it be. What were some of those things or projects you did leading up that brought you to this place, and why so much? Like I said, it does seem like digital sonic textures are the focus of your songs much more than standard pop hooks or like lyrically or something. I always feel like with you that's the core essence of the music that you're making.
Yeah, I think it starts off, being in a kid again and being in friends bands, literal garage bands,
Yeah.
trying to be, Pavement was one of the big bands that we really wanted to try to emulate. And as you do as a kid, you start off, emulate what you like. And I just kind of got fed up with the dynamics of having to be in a band, And then when electronic music comes around and it's like, oh, wait, there's Liam Howlett is the Prodigy, or Left Field is two dudes. And I thought to me is like, well, can I get on this myself? How much of this can I do myself? And we're talking Windows 95 was the technology at that
Yeah.
point. So I was like, got to figure out a way to do this on a computer, or like, how do they, get these kinds of sounds to work? Like, what's a synthesizer? That whole thing snowballs you into it. And as far as whether or not that it comes off as, I like to think of it as like cinematic. I think it's just really because I really like cinematic stuff. Like I think about movies and films when I'm writing music. I don't really like lean on the tropey kind of things of like you said, of like my girlfriend broke up with me. To me, I love the idea of giving people a world, someplace you can fall into, especially headphone music. Because again, as a kid, I had my headphones on. I was listening to these records that had a lot of different kinds of textures happening to them. And that emulation kicks in and you want to be part of that. And I don't know, it really resonates with me in when I'm creating. So I just, you run with what you're good at, and I think that is a pretty good personification of what Slider is.
It's a story as old as time. Boy finds band is annoying as hell. Boy starts thinking, how can I replace these dudes with robots?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
I love it. So I think this leads really well into the next thing I want to hit on. You had a new single out in May, which I think we had, yeah, is song of the day on here called "Have No Fear." That really, really cool, a dark synthy, and kind of like I talked about, like very movie kind of vibe. And when you say that to me, that is kind of your inspiration, was there a particular, I don't know, film or show or something like that that you watched or put you in this place that then led to you wanting to write this story through this song?
To be honest with this one, no, because I had just come off of doing the score thing for Steven with the Welcome to Riot City, where he wrote a whole script and had a whole world set out. And it was really fun because it really was scoring an invisible film in that. So not
And who do you
so
mean by
much.
Steven in that? For
Oh,
those that might not know.
Steven at Brutal Resonance.
Yes.
You
Good
know,
friend of ours, awesome dude, and
yeah.
somebody that you've been working with a lot lately.
Yeah, we just hit it off. He approached me on the whole idea of doing it, and at the time, I was really willing to have some fun. And I like a good challenge, and that was what brought that about. But for Have No Fear, I really, what after doing that, went back to just wanting to jam. I have a hard time these days just wanting to sit in front of the computer and start creating songs. I'd rather get up and play some synths and play some drum machines and do stuff like that. So that's how Have No Fear started. It actually started back in Portland before we moved, and I was just using the Micro Brute, the Micro Freak, and just making that kind of core beat that's in the song, and it just sort of rolled from there. But stalled out with the move, and I didn't really know lyrically what I wanted to say. So it kind of sat for a bit, and only last summer did I kind of figure out like where the lyrical part of the song will fit into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, for that, not specifically
I
anything
do think, though, when
visually.
you talk about kind of the lyrical, it is a poignant concept right now, right? I mean, in my 45 years, I can't think of a time when the world ever felt so desperate. So just impending fear all around us of a lot of things, and I kind of liked that you took that as an anthem to, I don't know, rally back against that idea.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything that I write is really just the personal self-expression side of it. I don't try to do anything where I'm taking bits from pop culture, or like I know Richard Patrick from Filter, he likes to read what's in the news and write songs about what's happening. I'm not really ever like that. I do like when I can hit on a vein with lyrics that has that universality to it, that you can adopt it and kind of figure it out. But it is really me telling myself to calm down.
Yeah.
you know?
I think that's a mantra a lot of us are looking in the mirror every single day these days. Just be like, okay, it's just work, dude. You're just going to log in. You got this.
Yeah.
So in addition to the single coming up, you have a whole album that's just about to release and drop. Tell me about the release date, the cover art there, and what the title of the album is. And did you this one's also Brutal Resonance, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell
We
me a
got on
little,
so well that I decided why not?
yeah,
Why not
tell me a
release?
little bit about the impetus of this album and kind of what led you to write it, and maybe the overarching themes that you were thinking about when you did this.
So I treat the last three albums that I did, Erode, Automata, and Void, as kind of like a trilogy. Like there was a thread that kind of follows all three of those records, and they all have, single word titles for
Concept
names.
albums are for punks. You're doing trilogy.
it's really one of those things that you don't really know you're doing until afterwards. And then my brain
Yeah.
goes, hey, you know what? These all fit really well together, and they bookend really nicely. So coming off of that, I just wanted to have a little bit more fun and not really think conceptually, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
It really wasn't until Have No Fear was written that I was like, okay, here's a jumping off point. And that song itself kind of led to the rest of the record. And sometimes I'll come up with like the title of the album while I'm, originally conceptualizing it. Like A Road was like, that just hit me. I didn't have any songs written. It was just, I knew it was going to be a road. I didn't really know what this futile engine would be called, but I kind of settled on that as I started to realize there was a little thread growing through it that does really kind of bring the marriage of technology and the human existence into something that feels a little bit like the end times in a sense.
Sure.
So that's where I came up with the this futile engine. I kind of played it off This Mortal Coil. I like when three words, like, it came together real nice, and I feel like it hits well enough without me saying the point too much. I don't really want to hammer you with the point of what I'm trying to do. So that's where that whole thing started.
But I do think, like, in this data, there is this feeling that, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the giant machine of capitalism seems to have gotten so big to a point where it can barely rumble forward on its own energy anymore. And like, that's, to me, like, when I hear you say that and, think about that title, that's the image that I have. And that I often, like I said, get from your music is a picture somewhere, and it's just this monstrous rusting technology of a tank, big as a world, still rolling along, but you can see that it's barely able to support itself.
I couldn't have said it better. I think you nailed it perfectly there. Yeah. So we're gonna release it on July 21st. It's available for pre-order. I just got the CDs today.
Really cool cover. I like that. It kind of almost like a Rorschach test.
That's funny that you said that, because I showed it to my father-in-law because he was in town, and he's not, obviously has no idea what even electronic music is. And he was looking at it and going, oh, it looks like lungs. It looks like a human body part kind of thing. And I was like, you're not quite far off. And I mentioned to him, is like, I wanted it to kind of be like a Rorschach. I wanted you to see what you want in it, because I think, again, music or art or film, it's really the most interesting when you let the audience figure it out. If you're at the end of your movie hammering your point over someone's head, I think it's unnecessary. So yeah, totally. I went into creating it just thinking abstractly about the marriage of cyborg parts with human parts, and what would that look like where it wasn't so obvious that, like, oh yeah, you could put a human with like obvious components on their face. And
sure,
I have
Jean Picard, with
the Borg
metal eyepiece and Locutus.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where the whole genesis of this was. And I also wanted it to be stark white. All the rest of the last three records were very on black and very intricate, whereas this is kind of just embracing the negative space and utilizing that bright white, that starkness against the black imagery. And I'm really happy with all the graphics that I did for it. It took a while to kind of figure out, and I did use a little bit of AI with Midjourney to kind of train that to give me prompts so that I could think differently than I normally would think. Because when you're doing graphic design, a lot of the times you're really reliant on the graphics that you can sort a source. If you look at Stephen Gilmore's work, he's, sourcing really cool photos and bringing all that together and making more like a collage of it. So I wanted to do that, but instead of sourcing stuff that existed in the real world, I was like, let's bring in the impending doom of artificial intelligence and let that play a little bit off my design sense. So they're not all just like type in and an image popped out. I got some ideas and manipulated them and brought them into this whole design layout that way. So that was really fun, because I feel like that's, again, showing the kind of forward direction of what the record's supposed to embody.
I know another thing from you in the Sounds and Shadows group and talk it that you talk a lot about collaboration and doing that. For this album here, did you have any major contributors that you kind of wanted to shout out that you think added a big piece to this album?
Oh, totally. I love collaborating. And instead of thinking ahead of time, like, oh, like who would be cool to get, like, oh, could I get, somebody a little more famous than me involved? It was more of like, could I write something that I could get to my friends that would push them a little bit out of their comfort zone? So we started with Craig from
Mhm.
Landscape Body Machine, and he's been doing vocals now ever since leaving Frontline Assembly and doing that Landscape Body Machine, which is all ambient electronic industrial kind of stuff. And he's just been getting better and better with his voice, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna give this idea to you, but go nuts, like
Yeah.
don't worry about anything other than like pushing yourself. And he came back with this really crooning Depeche Mode kind of vocal, and I was just like, what, this is great. And so I went, oh, who else can I get for that? So we got Yvette, she's on there, and she had never done an electronic kind of dance track, and I gave her something really kind of that kind of like European techno kind of vibe. So
And she has a voice that to me is something you really don't hear in like dance music or electronic. She has like a
no,
very smoky, I think of almost like, I don't know, like jazz singer alternative like
yes,
quality to her voice. So
yes, totally. So getting her in an environment that's a little more my style was really interesting, and I think people will really like it. That's one of my favorite ones. And then I also just hit up Steven Seibold because I wanted somebody to scream really well. That's
and,
literally what
and
I did. I hit
Steven
him up
is
on Facebook.
is incredible for screaming on
Yeah,
anything. Although actually, like when you hear standalone, like some of his other project, can sing very pretty too.
totally. I think he's one of those underrated, like, I know people talk about like Mike Patton has like the best vocal range
Sure.
in rock music, but I think Steven's not that far behind. And I was trying to like scream the part out myself, and I just felt like, I really need that, that hate department
Yeah.
sort of just like gruff.
That's awesome. So another thing I wanted to get here to talk about is, in addition to this music and Slider and other projects that you do for you, that's an expression of you and kind of these ideas in your head. You also, kind of like you were talking about with encouraging others and Stephen, you do a lot of stuff within TV, film, like that idea where you're taking maybe someone else's vision and then producing or doing a song that helps add atmosphere and complete their vision for them. Tell me a little bit about how you kind of found your way into that world, and what's that like different from just writing the crazy nightmares in your own head versus trying to talk through with someone else and set an ambiance and mood for their vision.
Well, yeah, I've always wanted to score a film. That's kind of
Mhm.
like, I look at like, if I could have anybody's career, I'd want Clint Mansell from Pop Will Eat Itself,
Yeah.
being in that really kind of industrial punk realm, and then falling into films, and then just evolving into like some of the most greatest modern film scores to me are all done by Clint. From The Fountain to Moon, they're all really great. So I've always kind of like been driven to try to get my music involved in anything that can be seen in either a short film or in a TV show. And I scored a few short films, and the opportunity came around all the way back in 2010 to do a song for the HBO show True Blood.
Yeah.
And they have a bar in that show. If people aren't familiar, it's called Fangtasia, and all the vampires hang out there, and debauchery occurs, and they had a stripper scene, and they were thinking about, okay, well, what could we get into this? And one of the guys I was working with at the time knew Gary Calamar, the music supervisor. And we had a little piece of music that was left over from his band. And we went, well, how could we terraform this into something that would play on True Blood?
Right.
And we did that, and we pitched it. And Gary's like, this is great. that went into the show. And once that happened, I got approached by management who was like, hey, do you have more music? Do you want to get more, they're called syncs? Do you want to get more placements with syncs? And I was like, of course I do. I love marrying the audio with the visual. So from there, I wrote something for Fox's Bones. I did a gun montage for a character where he's doing his gun test. And then a lot of the other stuff is just songs that I've written without the influence of thinking of, oh, it needs to go in a show. Where it's just been part of my catalog that they'll go and they'll pitch into other things. Like an older track I have, Hell's Gates. That was a song I wrote with my coworker when I was working at Apple, and he came over to my apartment and rapped in my closet. Like we literally opened up the closet, stuck the little mic in there with the pantyhose on the coat, like so lo-fi. And that went into Don Cheadle's House of Lies.
Oh yeah, I love that one. That was a good show. It's so funny, like, to hear you say that. And because when I like to leave the subtitles on a lot of times when I watch TV, especially if it's maybe like a British show or something where the accents, I like to be able to. It always makes me laugh when it says like dark cerebral electronica music plays or something, the descriptions. And I always wonder if you on your computer have like 100 songs there that have descriptions like that, waiting for someone to call you and being like, do you have something that's post-apocalyptic, traveler, Eastern European? Actually, I have that exact thing. It's right here. Here's the description.
The nice thing is that I don't have to do that. I give it to my manager and he figures that part out, because there's always that level of interpretation, right? They could say, we want something that sounds blue. And then we go, well, we have this kind of blue. And they go, well, that's not the right blue. We want it to be more light blue. So there's always that breakdown when you're trying to describe music. So I like try to stay out of it and just be like, I've written this. It's probably darker than, putting in somebody else. But here you go, and they kind of fill in the blanks for me.
When Colin watches this interview, he's probably my bass player, Colin, is probably going to have flashbacks, because that's what he has to deal with all the time, because I am useless when it comes to musical technology. And so we'll be sitting there in studio and I'm like, actually, in this part right here, can you make it sound more like blue tinkly bits and less like sharp red stabby bits? And amazingly, he'll be like, yeah, okay. and he'll do it. He'll get, I'm like, I'm even amazed you knew what the fuck I was talking about, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
It reminds me of one of the times in my LA studio, I had started to try to take on some clients and do some mixing. And I had this guy come over who hired me. And he came into my studio and he sits there and he literally says this, and it's exactly what he said. You need to make the bass like a snake, coiled and ready to strike. And I just looked at him and was like, does that mean more bass or less bass? I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that information?
Get ready to strike.
Yeah, so it's a running gag now that I'll say. That's when hilarious. People want to talk to me about mixes, and does it need to be more like a snake? I'm not sure.
I'm definitely going to say that to Colin next time we're recording. I'm going to be like, make it more like a snake. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And it's a really kind of, I don't know, interesting thing that not everybody gets inside that world. And I think is a different way of writing music. So when the new album drops here in July, tell me a little bit, if we did this interview again 1 year from now, so 2024, what is it that you want to be talking about for this project? Where do you want to see it go? Do you want to like take it on the road and like, play out some shows with it? Is it that you want to find a way maybe to convert, like you said, the idea of what you do with creating visual image with sound and do like a score for a movie, maybe like a major one? That's ideally where you want to go. What is your perfect vision for the future that you want to be talking to me about a year from now?
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to not do that anymore. I'm actually trying to be like very in the moment, as Ram Dass would say, be here now. Just because you mentioned doing shows and such, I have a bad autoimmune disease that really keeps me from doing a lot of mobility that's needed to get around and posture on stage and jump around. So
Yeah.
I don't really see that as where Slider would go. I would love to, if anyone out there's got a short film or even has ties to, you know, whomever, I would love to score something.
Well,
I think
the
that would
people
be
watching this, share it around to the people you know that are in the industry. And I hate, that when you say that about the autoimmune disease, I don't have that. I'm just, really lazy. But my dream is to build either robots or get 20-year-old kids to play Amaranth songs that I write while I sit in my pajamas with my cats and they go out on the road. Or the robots dressed as us.
I mean, it's kind of worked with the Gorillas, and then Square Pusher a few years back, he actually worked with a cybernetics company, and they built these robots that play instruments, and he scored it all out. And there's just like mechanical pistons, like moving all the strings. It was pretty wild. So I wouldn't mind, the Square Pusher band doing Slider tracks.
So send them out on the road and, just, give them a bunch of oil as their ticket tabs for the bars.
Right. I think part of it too stems from the fact that when I was listening to electronic music and being kind of just isolated as a kid and with my headphones and not having too many friends, I didn't think there was a way to perform any of this.
Sure.
You would see kind of clips of like maybe the Prodigy at a festival, and it would just seem like these walls of stuff was just all around him, and you're just like, oh yeah, put the dancers out front because no one's going to want to watch me fiddle and patch things around. So
yeah.
I guess to me, I never really thought like, oh, this has to go that traditional route. Like I've got to get on a tour, I've got to be in that cycle of playing shows, write an album, play shows, write an album.
Sure.
So I bucked the trend, I guess, with that as far as what's the norm.
Well, and I think a lot of that's breaking down to a point, kind of like we talked about. The giant machine of capitalism is making it harder and harder for the traditional rock band concept of, I mean, in our scene in particular, how many bands do you see that are, rolling around with a drum kit and a drummer? Almost everybody's got backing tracks now and electronic. And I don't think it's that people don't want to have the drums in the sound or things like that. I think it's just not economical anymore. Like,
Right.
how are you going to, our entire loadout, you can fit in the back of a Subaru Outback. You know what I mean?
Right.
And a lot of bands have to get that light to stay economically viable while they're out there on the road. And I think maybe that is the way that the future is going, of kind of doing more with maybe a video behind you, or, a movie, an image, some other way to do that, but allow you to get a live band experience.
Yeah, I think it's, more and more people are more into that or okay with it. I remember there used to be that kind of disdain for, oh, it's just a dude on stage with a laptop.
Sure.
And I've always pushed back at that because a lot of electronic music has always been DAT as well. Like Underworld is like 90% DAT, and it's just Carl Hyde at the front of it with the mic and the guitar. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think economical is a great way to put it. It's really getting you efficient, a lean machine that can go and do shows and not have to break your back. But I would love for like augmented reality or some sort of, like the Twitch kind of mode to kind of evolve even further. And let's see where that will go.
I've even heard of a lot of bands now going in where they're doing live shows and say something like Fortnite or whatever. And that's becoming, which I've never played, I don't know much about, but I like the idea that like you feel like you're a part of live music experience on your couch,
Yeah. I think definitely the pandemic helped switch people over to being like, okay, this is okay.
Yeah.
Because I remember during the pandemic, Run the Jewels had a concert that you could watch, and because they couldn't go out and do it. And I thought that was done so well. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I turned my subwoofer up on the TV, and it's close enough, right?
So this is something that I've already pointed out is totally lost and wasted on me, but a lot of my listeners are interested and care about this. And I feel like you're a bit of an expert, of somebody who's kind of embracing sonic technology. What's something for this new album, whether it's a plug-in, a piece of equipment, something like that, that you feel like played a pivotal role in this record that you'd never worked with or used before?
Well, during the creation of it, once I got moved into my new space, I got a Korg Op 6 synth that's an FM synthesizer, and because Korg was blowing them out, I think it was it Mike Nolan who posted like, hey, these are super cheap right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I love synths. I love cheap synths. I'll make room. I'll find a place for it. I think that really got me thinking a little bit more outside of keeping things clean and perfect and polished, because when I get a new synth, I'm kind of not into the manual. I just kind of go in and push it. I want to push the thing as far as it can go and see, like, it might not sound great, but it gives you that, oh yeah, I know I can go here and I can go there with it. And in doing that, it brought in some ideas to me of like, what if this wasn't as perfect as some of the other Slider records, like very polished, everything's in its place, and go with more of the rawness, go with more experimentalism. So I think that kind of carries through every track, is that I'm doing something a little bit different than I normally would have done if I would have just been, I don't know, playing it safe in the sense of like my own style. So I always like the idea of pushing myself with making new records. And for this one, it was really just looking at hardware and pairing that with weird distortion, or getting some FM or AM frequencies to feed back through, ungrounded loops, noise loops and stuff like that. So that's really the whole, again, playing into that futile engine of like, let's embrace the chaos and let's embrace the not perfectness, because electronic music can get really boring and really vapid when people are really focused on making every single thing perfect. Like, let me layer 7 snares on top, let me get the snare to be exactly how I think it should be. And I feel like that's such a trapping to self-expression, and I wish a lot of people would stop doing that and really focus on having something to say.
Sure. No, I agree. I think whether you're talking about organic music or, electronic or anything, going for perfectionism is a tough road, that sometimes it's a rabbit hole that can lead you to a place where you don't find any kind of a meaningful conclusion at the end of it, And I think outside of music, anything in life, you know what I mean? It's easy to get lost in your own quest for perfect, succinct clarity, when the world isn't necessarily that way. The world is full of chaos, and sometimes you have to accept that that's going to be a part of everything that you're doing,
Totally. Yeah, I think in a way, a lot of that, at least for me, is I would look at it as like, that's trying to control the chaos. You're trying very hard in your art to kind of supplement what you're not able to control.
You're going to end up like Jurassic the life parking this thing if you try too hard. All right, we are to the part in the interview now where we're a music review page first and foremost. And so I always like to ask an artist, what are a couple things that you're listening to that are getting you excited now in the new music scene? And like I said, you do so much with collaboration and working with people. I know you kind of have a bit of a finger on the pulse, and we're very active in the group talking about it. So I'm curious to hear, what are some of those things for you right now?
Well, it's weird, when I write, I don't tend to listen to a lot of electronic music or anything that could be remotely close to what I'm working on. Not that I don't want to hear it, I just don't want to be accidentally influenced. So I'll listen to a lot of stuff that are kind of like outside of my wheelhouse. But now that the record's over and I can kind of come back and pick up on some things that I haven't listened to, the new Spotlights record that came out, Alchemy for the Dead, I stumbled across their record. I think it was a 2008 record, Love and Decay, just on a whim. And I was like, oh man, this is really great, because it hits on, you talk about nostalgia, it hits on those kind of like hum and failure nostalgia, but it's new and it's got a different spin on it. It brings a little shoegaze into it. And I was like, oh yeah. So when their new record came out, I was like pre-ordering that. And I just got the vinyl at the front of June, and I've been listening to that a lot. It's really good. It kind of pushes the band a little further outside of, again, like I like getting them out of their comfort zone. So that's a really great record to check out.
I'll make sure to drop that in the links of the interview when we release, so everybody can look that up. Anybody else?
Yeah, Left Field. I talked about them earlier, but they came out with This Is What We Do at the end of 2022. But what they did for Record Store Day was they went back and took the album and reconfigured it. If anyone knows Left Field stuff, they're known to take like their single and then remix the single so that if you buy the 12-inch, you've got like different versions of like Afro Left and original with Tony Holiday from Curve. Like, so there's some cooler, more dubby cuts that they're used to. So they did that to the whole record, which I was like really floored with, because to me, the version excursion, which is what they call it, of This Is What We Do, is more left fieldy than the album that came out, because they're pushing away from the stereotypical like vocals up front. You know, they've got more dubby, more bassy stuff. And to me, that just really resonated with me. So I've been listening to that a lot, because it's great to just kind of put on and zone out, or, you know, gonna cook, put it on and, you know, cook away.
Yeah, very cool. This has been a total pleasure. It was great talking to you in person. You know, like I said, we interact on the group a lot and stuff, but getting to see you in the digital flesh was very, very cool. I'm really excited for the record. People need to check it out and go back through the other work. Like I said, this is one of those where, to me, listening to Slider is the perfect thing to throw on in your earbuds, hit play, and just close your eyes and take a journey. You know, it's one of those that you had a bad day and you need to be somewhere else. This is, you know, one of those bands that's just wonderful to kind of transport you away from your own bullshit. So we always like to spin out to a track by the artist so people can get a flavor. On the new album here, if you had one track that you feel like is the first thing people should listen to, you know, hearing your band for this project, what would be the track that you think people should spin first that's going to pull them in and make them a part of the journey?
I honestly think it's probably Pulling Me Under with Craig, because it really embodies both the collaborative spirit of the album as well as the whole kind of ethos of the record being a little bit more techno than previous records, really leaning into the hypnotic beat. The tempos are a lot quicker than they were on previous records. There's not as much of a trip hop, massive attacky kind of feel. There's still two really big ambient cinematic, like blow your mind out tracks, but a lot of them, the rest of them are really beat oriented, and Pulling Me Under has a really good encapsulation of that for sure.
I love it. This has been the Sounds and Shadows podcast with Slider, and you will now be hearing the track Pulling Me Under. For all of you out there in interweb land, keep it dark, y'all.